I don't know why every time I do these videos, like I get super nervous as if I was like presenting at work or something. I really don't know. But anywho, thank you guys for tuning in. I know last week I did not post any new segments. It was a bit busy. Was a bit of a hectic week, and this is about to be another hectic week. So I figured before it gets into the hectic part of it to share this segment and record this segment today for you guys. And I was really like, I was even praying. I'm like, God, like, I have so many like different topics. I'm like, what is the topic that I should talk about today? And I don't know, like it just kind of hit me. And I want to talk about mental health, and not just mental health in general, but specific to the lack, I feel, of awareness that there is to mental health, and to speaking up about it, to seeking help in the Christian community, which I personally, my opinion is that that's very unfortunate. And I think that you can talk about maybe things you haven't lived. A bunch of people do, and have an opinion about something you haven't lived, but I feel like things really have substance when like you've walked the walk, like you're not just talking, right? It's kind of like people with no kids. My husband and I keep watching Married at First Sight. We've been binge watching it. We're almost done. I got him hooked because that's my show. Like I've watched every season. And I forgot what season. He kind of like, I think he sat in on like an episode and he was like, what? Like there's so much drama. And I'm like, yeah, you got to watch this with me. So anywho, he's been faithfully watching with me. And one of the couples, they're like talking about like, I guess one thinks that once you have kids you can't have fun, the other one's like no, you can still have fun, and whatever, like they're arguing, and then they're talking about like her house is pretty much white, spotless, white couches, white counter, everything is white, and he's like, you know that this is gonna get dirty, and she's like, no, like I'm gonna watch the kids, I'm gonna make sure they don't dirty anything. And I was just like, this is stuff that people with no kids say. Like, my kid's gonna be like this. Like, no, my kid's not gonna be bad. My kid's gonna listen. And my kid this and my kid that. Okay. Or I'm not gonna let my kid do this. I'm not gonna give him a tab. Okay. Once you have a kid, you'd be surprised how much you let slide just for some sanity. But anyways, my whole point is, right, a lot of people talk about things they haven't lived. I like to kind of stick to things that I have lived, that I have experienced, and that I can kind of give a bit of my testimony and my take on it. So, mental health to me is a very important topic. I think overall, like worldwide, I'm glad that it's been brought more to light, especially like even for men, because men usually don't speak out about their emotions, about how they're feeling, right? The pressures of being a man, especially when you get into like that role of being a husband, being a father, like the pressure that's on men. Men don't speak up about it. They're not as vocal as us women, right? So I'm glad that mental health, like awareness to it, has been brought. However, I think it's very unfortunate that in the Christian community, I don't think a lot has changed. And I'm not sure why. I feel like as time goes on, like we should definitely evolve. We should be learning more and we should be growing. And if there's something that I think where the problem kind of starts is this like ignorance. It's like a really big ignorance in the Christian community. You guys know I'm Christian, so when I say the Christian community, obviously I'm talking about in general. This does not encompass everybody. Clearly, there's definitely people that speak out about it. There's people like me, right, that share their testimony and openly talk about it and believe in seeking help. But then there are also people within our Christian community that are not advocates of talking about that. They don't even necessarily believe that a Christian should suffer, that their mental health should suffer. And I personally, I've been a believer, and there'll be episodes where I share like my testimony, but in summary, like I was born and raised, being Christian, going to church, like I've known God since I was a young child. Like that's what I grew up like. That was the center, that has been the center of my world. I don't know anything outside of it. And when I say that, I mean, I haven't experienced things, but like that's pretty much been my world. Like God has definitely been my compass and the center of everything. And even with that, like I struggled with mental health, and I maybe at the time didn't necessarily know that, but in my, adolescence, like as a young teenager growing up, like I struggled a lot. And I knew about God. Obviously, I needed to have a personal encounter with him, which I eventually did. But even after that, like I struggled. And I personally think that it is something that the devil definitely uses when it comes to like me, my family. I've seen him try to use that card. So I am very aware about that. However, I feel like this whole like lack of awareness in the Christian community comes from this ignorance that as a Christian, you're supposed to be some sort of supernatural being that doesn't mentally suffer, right? That, everything is like all about praying. Like if you pray about it, it's just going to go away. If you pray about it, you're going to stop feeling sad. If you pray about it, like you're not going to struggle mentally. Your emotions are not going to get the better of you. And I feel like it's very ignorant. Like, how many people do we not know that they're like pastors, evangelists, prophets, like they're these known people, and so unfortunate, like you end up hearing like, oh, they killed themselves, or you end up like they end up, they ultimately decide to stop serving God. Like there's just so much that isn't talked about. Like being Christian does not make you a supernatural being. Like we depend on God. Just we're normal, like we're human. We just try to depend on God and live our life right to honor God. I would say that's the main difference, but that does not make us any less human. It does not take away any emotion. It does not take away anything. Like we go through everything that everybody else does, the non-believers go through. The difference is we have an anchor, right? We have an outlet. We have someone we can go to, of course, right? And break down and cry out, and we recognize that we have help that comes from God. But I feel like people stay stuck on that, right? My help comes from the Lord. But the Lord has also allowed us to have other resources here on earth. Like he's given that to us. And when I hear people sometimes talk so badly about like seeking help, going to therapy, talking to someone, right? Whether it's for your own sake, for your marriage, whatever it is, it's so ignorant to me for you to tell me that it's dumb to sit down with someone and talk about your feelings, because that's the same thing, honestly, to me, as you saying you've had a constant headache, it doesn't go away, and you go and you sit in your doctor's office and pretty much talk to him about what's going on so that he could try to find a solution, right? What's the difference, right? There's something wrong with your health potentially, and you seek help. But for some reason, if there's something wrong with my mental health, it's such a horrible thing to seek help. Like that, I've never understood that. And again, like personally, like I've gone through a lot, like mental health wise. Like as a young teenager, I had a hard time managing my emotions. My parents are also older, so they were not parents that I could like sit down, have like a real conversation with them, let them know how I was feeling. And that's okay. It doesn't take away from the type of parents they were. They were great parents, right? But we didn't have that relationship, right? I didn't have that ability to just kind of express myself to them. And I always express myself to God. I've always loved writing. And I remember I used to write letters, right, to God, like just pouring it all out. And that was like my way of communicating with him. And I would pray, and those emotions were still there. Like that mental battle was still there. And I remember when I was an adolescent, I used to go to like I think they call it the social worker, the guidance counselor, I don't remember, in like middle school. And I just used to tell them, like, I just feel like I'm in just such a dark place. And I remember, I even told them, like, I have tried, to end my life. I did at a point. I was going through a very dark stage, and I was just like I don't see light. Like I really didn't. It just felt very dark. And I mean, you report that in school. They took me into like the hospital just to make sure I wasn't gonna try to harm myself again and whatnot. But as I've grown older, like I realized like it wasn't just, oh, I was young, I didn't know how to manage my emotions, because even up to lately, like I battle with it. I battle with my emotions. I battle with the thoughts inside my head, right? I battle with many times now, like not feeling enough, not feeling like I'm doing enough, even though like you're doing so much as a mom. And there's just so much that taps into mental health. And I feel like there isn't as much awareness about it. It's not talked about in the church. Like you don't really hear people talk about like, oh, if you're not, you're not feeling the best version of yourself, like go seek help, go talk to someone, if you feel like you're just in this dark cloud. Like I feel like all I've ever heard is pray. Like the answer to everything is prayer. Oh, of course, please pray first. Prayer is important, but it's not just prayer. Like that's what I'm trying to get at, and that's where I think the ignorance lies, right? It's like I'm telling you, to the extent that I've heard the ignorance, I've literally heard people saying, "Oh, your husband's beating you? Pray about it." What? Yes, pray about it, because you should pray about everything, absolutely everything, from the smallest thing to the biggest thing. But please do not just tell somebody that is getting abused to just pray. Like that's how people end up dead. Just stay in a situation, pray that he's one day going to change. And of course, to each their own. But in my opinion, again, I'm not saying that this is factual. This is my opinion. I think that that's ignorance. I think that if you are going through things, it doesn't have to be to that extent, but it could even be mentally, to tell someone to just pray sometimes, especially when, like, as a Christian, I know that there are times you don't even have the strength to pray for yourself. Like, you really don't. Literally, all you have the strength to do is maybe sit there and bawl your eyes out. And God hears that. Like, God hears that cry, and he knows what you need. And he definitely will be your comforter and take all burden. And I'm a big believer that God definitely can turn all your pain into joy. All your sorrow, he can turn it into joy. God can turn everything around. So I think that 100% leaning into God is it. But I don't think it's the only thing that we should be doing. I think that we should be open, and we, in a Christian community, should advocate for people to seek help, for people to talk to someone. We can't just always tell people, go pray. Like sometimes people need someone to hear them out and give them an advice, or just tell them like, I'm here, I'm hearing you. Like ask you questions that make you really kind of think back. And I think just professional help is not, it's kind of it's kind of frowned upon a little bit, and people may judge you for seeking it. But I personally, I've gone to therapy for myself. I've done marriage counseling. I highly recommend it. I'm never going to say do that and don't pray. I'm always going to tell you pray, because my faith is based on that. I definitely think prayer changes things. Prayer changes you. And prayer can really move mountains. Prayer can change the dynamic of your entire life. Absolutely. Can you pray to be healed? Absolutely. But then why do you go to the doctor? Because God also placed resources here on earth. So it's like, you can't tell me you do one thing, you use some of God's resources, but then you choose not to use the other. That's all I kind of want to shed light on. It's just like that. I feel like that ignorance, like we need to get rid of that. We need to get rid of just throwing people into like, oh, just go pray ignorantly. We really need to understand that when someone is suffering, don't just send them to pray. First of all, yes, they can pray and they should pray. You should pray for them too. And not only that, but you should help them get help, because sometimes like we really do just need to talk to someone, like a physical being. Like that does not take away from who God is and his power. But he can use those therapists, those psychologists, to give you a breakthrough through whatever you're going through. And I know what it's like. Like, recently I kind of posted about it. Like before I gave myself a break, I was in a really dark time where it was just like, God, you just blessed me with a house. Like I have a beautiful family. My marriage is good. Like my kids are well. We're all healthy. There's not a need for anything, a physical need for anything. But I just felt so like sad. And so like my mind just, these thoughts of like you're a failure, just all these things. Like I really got into a funk, a really, really bad funk. And I was like, you know what? Like I recognize that obviously I was being tested in a time of my life where I was being grateful. I realize, yes, the devil is trying to use my own thoughts against me. He's trying to get me to not be grateful, right? And to limit my worship. And I was able to combat that obviously through prayer and stuff, but also just talking about it, even if it's with a friend. Talk about it. Talk to somebody about it. If you're going through something as a Christian, don't feel bad. Don't feel like, oh, I'm not digging deep. Like I don't have as great as a relationship with God as I should have because my mental's not doing good. Not at all. As a matter of fact, if you're actually probably doing everything you have to do, you're seeking Him, right? You're looking for Him. And you're praying without ceasing, and you're doing all these things that we should as Christian. You're doing your best to honor Him with everything in you. That is actually when the devil rises up and starts to attack you. And if he knows that it's a little bit easier to attack your mental health, or that's where like the gut punch is going to be, that's exactly what he's going to do. If he knows that it's attacking your health or attacking your family, that's what he's going to do. So we need to understand and stop this whole like thinking or feeling bad or making other people feel bad about saying like, hey, I'm feeling depressed, or I'm not feeling myself, I'm feeling cloudy, I'm feeling like I'm in a dark place, and just telling them go pray o te tiene que meter más con Dios. Like, you know how many times I've heard that? And it's kind of disgusting. Like, first of all, you can't talk on other people's intimacy with God, because that's literally just between you and God. You can I don't believe in telling people that, obviously, unless they've been verbal and told you like, I'm not really digging in, then maybe you can send them to go do that. But if somebody's just telling you like, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'm not doing good, I'm just not in a good headspace, please don't tell them to go seek harder, to go pray harder, or to do all these things. Like, maybe they're already doing that. And that is why I say, like, always pray, but don't just discount every other resource that God has placed here on earth for us. Counselors, psychologists, they're all here to help us out. They serve the same purpose that a doctor does. A doctor diagnoses you, hears out what's wrong. They do exams, they run tests just to make sure that you're gonna be good. Mental health resources are also there to ensure that you're gonna be good. So 1,000% lean on God, but we need to stop being ignorant and telling people that that's the end all be all, and it ends with that. Like, nothing else should be used. We need to be more accepting of, as Christians, you can battle with mental health, and that is okay. It does not speak to your deepness or lack of depth in a relationship with God at all. So if you have battled with mental health at any point, please don't feel bad. Please don't feel like your relationship with God is not that deep because you're struggling with this. No, you're human. That's all it is. You are human. I am human. And we're all going to go through some sort of battle, whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically. We're all going to suffer while we're here on earth. Like, it's not going to just be, roses, rainbows, like everything great. No, not at all. We're definitely going to suffer. We're going to go through some things, but of course, right, we have God. But we need to not be so judgmental and just shut out all these other resources that He has blessed us with. Like, He's the one that has allowed people to capacitate themselves to study, right, to get degrees in order to help us out. Like, it's all a resource, and I'm all for tapping into your resources. And hey, if you want to lean on a Christian psychologist, like, I highly recommend that. I have usually only gone, aside from school, my psychologists, my therapists have been Christian, right? I want them to be able to understand like where my mindset is at and kind of match that. So I recommend that. Like, that's why there are Christian psychologists and Christian therapists, because there are people that can have your same belief, and they are here to guide you to sources, right? And to dig deep and understand what is the root of why you're feeling the way you're feeling. So please don't feel bad if you are have battled with mental health. It does not define you as a Christian. And as Christians, we should all advocate and hug our brothers and sisters that are going through a rough time, a rough patch, a dark place. Don't just send them to pray. Pray for them. They may not have the strength right now to pray for themselves. Pray for them and help them seek help. God bless you all, guys. I hope that this was a blessing to you all.